Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. My name is Stephanie Robert, and I'm director of the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work here at UW-Madison. Our school is pleased to organize and facilitate this important event again this year. We've organized this conference for many years, with last year being the first time we held it online. We're pleased to have it online again so that more people are able to benefit from our outstanding speakers. This year's conference includes 34 speakers spread over this afternoon and next Friday afternoon. I think we have about 2,000 people signed up for today. For many of us, this conference has become a critical date on our calendar each year. We learn, scrutinize, question, and find new ways to commit ourselves to addressing racial injustice. We ask this of ourselves, and our social work code of ethics demands it of us. The theme of this year's conference is Radical Hope in a Racialized Society. I'm sure you'll all agree that we need hope now more than ever, but hope doesn't come easy. We need the creativity to dream it, and the tools, commitment, and collaborations to act on it. Hopefully, you will each find hope, dreams, tools, and new collaborations or community throughout this conference. A conference of this scale requires many hands. Thank you to the students, staff, community members, and instructors who served on the planning committee this year, especially the conference co-chairs, Laura Dresser and Khadijah Marquardt Davis. Thank you also to our many financial donors and for making this conference a reality. Because of our donors, we're able to make this conference free for you all and to provide free CEUs to those of you who want them. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a challenging but enjoyable conference. I'm now going to turn things over to Khadijah Marquardt Davis, who's a policy advisor for a Wisconsin state senator. She's also co-chair of the conference committee and an MSW alumna of our school. So on Wisconsin, and welcome, Khadijah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So welcome to the 8th annual Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, sponsored by the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And as Stephanie said, I'm Khadijah Marquardt Davis, a co-chair of the planning committee for the conference. And as an alumna of the school's MSW program, it has been an incredible honor to help execute and plan this conference. I'm particularly excited about the theme of this year's conference, Radical Hope in a Racialized Society, because if you can't dream of a better future and if you can't have hope, then how are you supposed to fight for that or even want to make it to the next day? Radical hope to me are those small instances that we can pull inspiration from. It's what we draw upon to keep moving forward. And so by placing radical hope at the center of our work allows us to dream big and imagine creative solutions to our society's most pressing racial and social justice issues. So through this conference, you'll hear from speakers who push the boundaries of what is possible in our profession and who continually challenge the status quo. As such, I hope that you walk away from this conference feeling inspired, hopeful, and ready to take action. And so today, as we begin our conference, we have more than 1,000 people gathered, or at least registered, from across Dane County, Wisconsin, the nation, and even the globe. So overall, this conference was started 8 years ago when current events forced us to re-examine how social work responds to continual incidences of social injustice. We knew it was important to challenge social workers to engage in racial and social justice action. As such, our goals are to explore the impact of social policies and services on racial inequities, including the unintended consequences of these policies and services, to support social workers working toward an increasingly equitable and racially just society, and to celebrate the profound social justice actions of our social work community. And today we build upon this by moving into concrete anti-racist action and by placing radical hope at the core as a core social work discipline. The popularity of this conference has made it very clear that social workers are striving to do better, be better, and are continually challenging ourselves to examine not only the individual roles, but our individual roles, but also our profession. However, it's important to remember that anti-racism is a verb and requires us to not only show up, but to take action. So, as you spend your time with us today and next Friday, I ask that you keep an open mind to all the various ideas presented, and that you continue to challenge and push yourself towards racial justice and anti-racist action. Because we can no longer wait for change to happen. Instead, we must push our profession to change. So speak up, speak out, and take action. And so with that, I would also like to move into a land acknowledgement that I would like to present in order to honor the Indigenous peoples of Wisconsin. So on behalf of the Planning Committee for the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, we ask that you join us in acknowledging that the University of Wisconsin campus here on the shores of Lake Mendota resides within the sacred homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place they call Dejob or Four Lakes. As the reach of the university extends to the far corners of our state, we are also respectfully recognize the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations of Wisconsin. Whether you're watching this from the land of the 12 First Nations or you're more distant, we encourage you to learn about the history of the land you are on. Our land-grant university could not have been established or sustained if it were not for the state and federally sponsored settler colonialism that disposed and displaced American Indian nations and communities across our state. We must now confront the outcomes of unjust land treaties and the harm caused by our university's past complicity with policies of cultural and physical genocide as we seek reconciliation with Indigenous nations and communities of Wisconsin. As social workers, we have a duty to look critically at the role our profession has played in the attempted cultural genocide and destruction of Indigenous families, such as was the aim of boarding schools in this state and across this continent. This conference is rooted in critical reflection on our work as social workers. Our goal is to bring clarity about the past, but also to challenge and inspire us all to move into action once the conference is over. With this, we hope this conference provides space for critical reflection, humility, and openness, which will allow us all to reflect, to hear, and to tell truths and move toward action and transformation to support Indigenous rights, cultural equity, and racial equity. With acknowledgement and gratitude, we move forward in our journey. The fact that we are in Ho-Chunk land in the way that we are on it is not separate from what we are gathered here to do today. And with that, thank you. And now I'm going to move on to a couple of housekeeping updates. So today we'll begin the conference with Rashaan Miller's opening keynote, which will run from roughly like 12:15 to 1:30. And then we will have a 30-minute break before the start of our first round of breakout sessions. There are 6 to choose from, and they will start at 2 p.m. Central Time this afternoon. Next week, on Friday, February 4th, we'll start with breakout sessions from noon to 1:30, and then our closing plenary, a conversation between Oceana Sawyer and Aline Moultro on keeping radical hope alive from 2 p.m. till 3:30 p.m. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure to register for next Friday's portion of the conference, and which you can do so at confrontinginjustice.socialwork.wisc.edu. Additionally, breakout presentation links will be located on your Eventbrite landing page for the conference, and it's also linked below in the YouTube description box. And although we have a large capacity in each presentation, if you find that the first choice is full, please go back to the Eventbrite landing page and select a different session. All sessions will be recorded and available soon on the conference website. And if you are looking to have CEUs for the plenary session, please click on the link to the virtual sign-in sheet on the YouTube description box below, and follow the procedure listed on our conference website and Eventbrite page. links for the continuing education. And as a reminder, you will receive your CEUs in the next month if you registered and filled in the virtual sign-in link connected to the plenary. And finally, watch for our evaluation form. Please take the time to fill it out and return it to us. Your feedback is honestly greatly appreciated. And so now, it is with real excitement that I introduce you to our keynote speaker, Rashaan Miller. Rashaan understands that there's more to a person than their mental health diagnosis. Mental health affects all ages, races, and genders. It does not discriminate. As a young Black educator living with bipolar disorder, Mr. Miller knows that his struggle will be more difficult than others, and he's here to tell you that you don't have to struggle alone. As an accomplished author, speaker, counselor, and consultant, he's dedicated his life to not only reshaping the negative connotations associated with mental health, but also directly impacting the lives of those living with mental health challenges. His life work is to uplift, empower, encourage, and teach others who live with mental health challenges how to thrive in their lives. He's passionate about bringing mental health awareness to the forefront of the Black community, so he obtained his master's degree in clinical health counseling to change the availability of Black male therapists. Mr. Miller is a practicing mental health counselor in Charlotte, North Carolina at his private practice, The Good Stress Company. Rashaan not only wants to empower those who struggle with mental health, but those who support this community as well. He created Be Who You Needed, a program that provides consultancy services and training to therapists and like-minded individuals to empower them to make the greatest impact in the mental health field. Rashaan's achievements in mental health wellness have been widely recognized. He's been featured on TEDx, The Weather Channel, Complex, Huffington Post, and Power 105.1's The Breakfast Club, Blavity, and The Good Men Project. He's also the recipient of the American Psychiatric Association Foundation Award for Advancing Minority Health, the South by Southwest Community Service Award, and the Omega Psi Phi brother Paul Woods Bridge Builder Award. Of all of his accolades and roles, however, Mr. Miller proudly first serves as a mental health change agent. Rashaan's inspirational work has globally impacted countless lives in underserved populations through his compassion, transparency, and awareness. And so it's with that I introduce Rashaan Miller. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Khadijah. Oh, man. I guess, well, for one thing, I wanted to say thank you all for being here. I get real anxious when people read my bio because it's kind of weird just to hear about just the things that you have accomplished and having someone read it. But then also, one of the things I wanted to let you all know today, I know this conference is virtual and they're used to having it in person. But luckily for you all, I'm able to join you from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm actually sitting on the couch that's in my office. So when my clients come see me, this is where they sit, the ones that actually come into the office. So I'm having a session with you all from my actual therapy couch in my office. So I feel like that's pretty dope. I hope you all are in a safe space and that you're warm and that you are comfortable and ready to just take on this conference and all of this information that we have to provide for you today. With this particular thing, I wanted to say we're going to go on a journey today during this keynote. I want to tell you a story, and hopefully it resonates with you all when it comes down to thinking about radical hope in a racialized society. And especially when it comes down to addressing your own challenges, but then also understanding how you show up and serve to the community that in whatever capacity that you do so. So with this particular story, I want to start with this. So for those of y'all, I know y'all can see it. I'm used to the interaction, but so this right here is a straitjacket. My story today is going to start in 2006 when I was actually in one of these. I was a sophomore at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And at that current state, I had to be literally drugged to the hospital by my family members because they noticed that something wasn't quite right with me. As someone that grew up in rural North Carolina, Bertie County to be exact, Lewiston Woodville to be even more exact, I grew up in an era where we didn't talk about mental health that much. Only thing we knew about mental health challenges is we call certain people crazy and you just leave them alone. So especially as a Black male growing up in the South, that's not something that I subscribe to. I felt like that was something, we don't go see therapists. We don't go actually talk to people about our issues. We simply pray about it and move on. You just had to grit it and bear it. But in 2006, I found myself in a psychiatric ward in a mental health hospital. And that was one of probably my lowest points of my life. And I say one because of the fact of, we experienced a lot of things during life. But for me to end up in a straitjacket in a padded room, and then also as, the crazy floor of a hospital, that's something that I wasn't used to. Because I grew up as, a 3-sport athlete. I played football, basketball, and ran track. I graduated near the top of my class from high school and ended up going to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill on an academic scholarship. Once I got to the University of North Carolina, I actually walked on to the football team and the track team. So to take it, as I think about it, and Khadijah said we're gonna do some critical reflection here. I was the man growing up. Just even going to college, I had a lot of friends. My family was cool. We were tight. Although I grew up an only child, I had a lot of cousins that I was able to just bond with and connect with and be able to share these great memories with. But now here at 19 years old, I'm sitting in the psychiatric ward trying to figure out, how did I get here? One of the things for me is that transition from college to going from high school to college was a tough one for me. Because school was fairly easy for me going in high school. But then also, like I said, I'm from a very small town. And when I say small town, I mean, we legit have one stoplight. It's a bunch of trees, a bunch of farms. I've had to prime tobacco before. We have cotton fields in front of my house and all of those things. So transitioning from this very small, tight-knit community and going to a large university where you have at least 30,000 students, that was an adjustment for me. But then also transitioning to going to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, coming from a small, tight-knit African-American community, that was another transition for me. Whereas a lot of people that looked at me when I was on that campus, they were only looked at me like, oh, I was just an athlete, not knowing that I got there on an actual academic scholarship, and that was actually smart. So like dealing with those particular things and understanding the stress that comes along with that. But then also just trying to manage being a 2-sport athlete in addition to trying to maintain your grades and all of that stuff. That was tough. But for me in that my first year in college, I struggled. But I wasn't able to ask for help because that's not something that, I was used to doing. I was used to doing everything on my own. I was used to manning up. I was used to figuring things out and being able to make things work. But in this particular situation, these things held me back. And I struggled with under pressure of being overwhelmed by the different stress. But then also with that, I caught a helmet to the knee. And so I had to have surgery. And then I knew that my football career was over. And then also I stopped running track. So now my identity was so caught up in, I forgot to mention, at the end of my freshman year, I ended up on academic probation because I almost failed out of school. So from birth up until about 19 years old, well, 18, 19 years old, my identity was wrapped up in being this athlete, this smart athlete. But now all of those things are taken away from me, and now I don't know how to really manage. And since I don't know how to manage, I try to, figure out ways to mask these particular things, especially with my roommate. Whenever he would ask, if I was okay, I'd be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Little do you know, I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I lost about 25 pounds in a matter of 6 weeks after my surgery. Critical reflection, as I go back and think about these particular things, I was depressed. But I didn't have a word for that at 19 years old and back in 2006. I didn't know what depression was. I just knew that I didn't feel like myself. I knew that I couldn't sleep because I had racing thoughts. I knew that I didn't want to eat. I got to a point where I didn't even want to shower. So I know I smelled. But I was too afraid to admit those things were going on because of the fact of I didn't know how people would judge me. I didn't know what people would actually say. One of my saving graces was the fact that I am an only child, and I talk to my mom every day. And my mom could literally hear something that was in my voice. And when she could hear that I wasn't quite who I was, she kept saying, baby, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Are you okay? So yeah, I'm good. I'm good. But she wouldn't, she wasn't going for it. So what she did was call my cousin. My cousin went to a neighboring college, North Carolina Central. And this is a cousin that I literally grew up with. She's 5 months older than me. So we grew up like siblings. And when she called my cousin and told her to come check in on me. And when she came and checked in on me, I was small. My hair was all over the place. I'm pretty sure I didn't smell good. And when she looked at me, all she could do was start crying because I wasn't the Rashaan that she's used to seeing. So with that, she called my mom. My mom said, yo, get him out of there. Get him out of that dorm room. Take him to your apartment. We go be up there. So my mom's house from where my cousin's apartment is about 2 hours away. And my cousin, my family ended up showing up probably about two and a half hours later. And they showed up deep. When they showed up, they actually kept asking me, Sean, what's wrong? What's wrong? I was like, I'm good. Knowing in my head that I wasn't. Because I went through a period where I didn't sleep for about 2 weeks. And also during this time period, I started to hear voices. And while I was hearing these voices, I struggled with trying to understand what should I do about them. So as my family members asked me what was going on, I wanted to tell them what was going on, but I was scared as well because I didn't want them to think I was crazy. With that, my family, because I kept saying that I was okay and that, I was, good, and they could see clearly that I wasn't. It was like, well, if you're not going to tell us what's going on, we are going to take you somewhere where you can get some help. And so I immediately thought about them taking me to the hospital, and I legit fought them the entire way there. But at 100 and maybe 40 pounds, 45 pounds soaking wet, and I hadn't been eating, I was weak. I didn't put up much of a fight, but I did as much as I possibly could. And luckily, like my family, my uncles and all of them came too. So when they got me to the hospital, I actually ended up punching a nurse. And so that's what landed me into the restraints. But then also they sedated me as well. Going through that particular moment, as I think back on actually being able to being transported into the hospital, but then also actually literally hitting a nurse. As a Black male, man, I'm luckily was able to get out of that alive, especially based on some of the things that we've seen over the last few years when it comes down to people that look like me being slain in the streets. So that's one thing we got to consider, right? But then also when I get into the hospital and I'm in, and when I did wake up at that particular time after the sedation wore off, and I'm looking around and nobody in there looked like me. None of the nurses, none of the doctors, none of the other patients. So I'm terrified because I'm already in a place where I don't know much about. And a lot of times when we see these particular things on TV, or, we hear these different stories about the quote unquote crazy house, these things, they are terrifying, man. And so I didn't know what they were going to do to me. So whenever the doctors or anybody would come in and ask me, oh, so what's been going on? Or, all of these, I was like, nothing, I'm good. I refuse to talk. Because for one, coming from where I grew up, I'm very conscious of the different things that people like me had to go through, especially when dealing with the medical profession. So you think about, the Tuskegee experiments. So you think about what Black women had to go through when individuals were doing stuff on their sexual organs and all of those things, just to understand what biology is, because we were looked at as less of people. So you keep all of those things in mind, even when you're going to the doctor and these people are supposedly there to help you. But you try to keep it buttoned up because you don't know. You don't trust them, especially if they don't look like you. All I knew is I wanted to get out of there. And one of the things that I had to come to terms with is understanding that if I didn't talk, I wasn't going to get out. And I was there for a while. But I eventually was able to talk about my different challenges that I had going on and was open and honest with them, because it wasn't because they made me feel comfortable, but it was because I wanted to get up out of there. Received the diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder with psychotic features at the time. And so those were the challenges that I was faced with at that particular moment. One of the things that impacted me while in that facility and receiving that diagnosis was the fact that I didn't even, believe what they were saying to me. Because we hear about bipolar disorder on TV. You hear about it more now and all of these things, but the doctor didn't do a good job of explaining to me what that meant. But then also, to be honest, I don't feel like he had a good explanation of what it would mean for me as a Black male. As they told me that I couldn't go back to school at that particular moment, I struggled with actually what I was going to do next, because I had to do a medical withdrawal from school. And one of the things that I wanted to consider was, well, I didn't want to, but I needed to go somewhere because I couldn't stay on campus anymore. But I didn't want to go home. Some of y'all can probably imagine why I didn't want to go home. For one, especially coming from a small town, and especially being a man coming out of there and going back prematurely, that comes with its own stressors. But then also people going to ask, why are you home? Or people get all up in your business and understanding, that you have this particular diagnosis. But then also, just rumors and stuff going around. So luckily for me, I had an uncle that lived in Charlotte. And my uncle allowed me to come stay with him. And one of the greatest moments in my life when it came down to my journey of hope was being introduced to a Black psychologist that looked like me, Dr. Kendall Jasper. And Dr. Jasper's approach to things was a little bit unconventional when it came down to how he did his treatment. He had an office and everything, but then when I went to his office, Dr. Jasper had on a t-shirt, some basketball shorts, and some Jordans. And so, we think about how our society and system is set up when it comes down to, we put certain medical professionals and any professionals on a certain, pedestal, and we have this sense of how these individuals look, right? So when I seen Dr. Jasper, I was like, "Yo, you sure you're a doctor?" Because you don't dress like one. But then also when I seen him, he came up and dapped me up and embraced me as a Black man. And that was something that was foreign to me when it comes down to not only just talking about, professionals and especially doctors, but then also in mental health, because this is not the things that we see on TV and this is not the things that we hear talk about. So with that in mind, Dr. Jasper, he was able to, I felt comfortable enough to share with him the things that I had going on. But then also I felt the ability to discuss certain things without having to explain a lot. And for many of y'all, that may make sense, but for those of y'all that don't, it's like, you have this in your particular culture, you may have an unwritten code of how you communicate, whether that be for me as a man, and I walk down the street, and if I do like this to another guy, we know that means what's up, and that's a sense of acknowledgement. But then also, just other consistencies across our culture. And it made me feel good to be able to, open up to him about what was really going on. But then also the language and stuff that he was able to use with me allowed me to receive what he had to say about mental health and about my particular diagnosis. Now, for me, especially in these particular times, man, I know it was rare for me to find a Black male therapist, but then also I know it's even rare now, even to this day. And this is 16 years later. But with that in mind, Dr. Jasper, he was also able to refer me to a psychiatrist that was able to prescribe me medication and create that equilibrium within my body from as far as a actual chemical balance. And honestly, just to be, frank with y'all, my psychiatrist was a white male, an older white male. And when Dr. Jasper referred me to him, I was like, nah, if you can't prescribe it, I ain't with it. But he was able to comfort me from the aspect of, he even went above and beyond. He was like, I'm gonna go with you to your psychiatry appointment, so that you know that I got your back. And then if anything that he tries to explain to you that you don't get, I can translate it for you. He went that extra mile for me, and I was able to receive that help. And then also I was able to understand that equilibrium, and I got better. Unfortunately for us, a lot of times, and for those of y'all that are in social work field, or you're counseling individuals, maybe you're doing the clinical work, or maybe you're doing the linking and coordinating and all of these different things. Y'all know a lot of times when people get better, they fall off because of the fact that they feel like they're good and they don't have to do the things that help them get better. I'm the same way. At that particular time when I got better and I started to feel like myself, I got to the point where I was like, all right, I don't need these meds anymore. I don't need to go to therapy anymore. I don't need none of that. And when I got to that point, my symptoms ended up coming back. And I also went back to school during this time. And when my symptoms came back, instead of me going back to talking to Dr. Jasper and getting back on my meds, I started to self-medicate. So self-medication for me during this time. So now we're looking at 2000, late 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. This was my self-medication. This is alcohol. This is a small bottle of Patron, but for me, I was going through a fifth of these every other day. And I would do this for over a span of three to 4 years. And during this time period, it was something that I thought was helping me, but in reality, it was making things worse. But then also my friends and family, I got really good at hiding, these particular things from them. Although I was drinking all day, every day, I still showed up to work. I still did great in school. Actually, my grades were the best in college during this time period. So I was legit a functioning individual that drank alcohol on a consistent basis. But one of the major things during this time period is that I also had these down moments where I no longer wanted to be here. I no longer wanted to suffer emotionally. As a former athlete, I could deal with physical pain, but that emotional pain hits completely different. During that time period, over these periods where I was binging on alcohol and doing experimental stuff and just being out there, trying to find something to fill that void. Whenever I couldn't find anything, I attempted to take my own life. I did 3 separate times and failed each time. Great. I'm grateful for that now. But those, when I say, earlier I said being in the hospital was my one of my lowest moments. Those were the other lowest moments. When you try to take some type of control over your life, or you want to end the emotional pain, and when you have enough guts to do it and you fail at it. During that last attempt, that was my time to really realize that, something got to change. You got to do something different. You need to get back on meds. You need to go back to therapy. You really need to address what's inside of you and address your particular foundation and understand who you are as a person. All of this leads to some of the things that Khadijah mentioned earlier. It led to me going to get my master's degree in mental health counseling and becoming a therapist. It led to me pursuing my PhD in international psychology and understanding how culture plays a large role into mental health and psychology. But then also understanding that I had to look at things completely different. So now we're talking about healing and hope in a racialized society, right? That radical healing that radical hope that we're talking about, honestly, it don't have to be so radical. The only reason it's radical is because it challenges the systems that are already in place. My foundation for my radical hope is I live by a motto: be who you needed when you were younger. I think about the 19-year-old Rashaan who needed someone to tell them it's okay to not be okay. I think about the 21, 22-year-old Rashaan who was binge drinking, but nobody really checked in on him because that's what we were all doing. Or he got really good at masking, his emotions, and got, very good at, serving other people in order to keep people away from, the different things that he had going on. I think about creating certain spaces for individuals to be able to open up and feel comfortable. Understanding that, from coming from where I come from and as a Black male, whenever I step outside of my house, I have to wear a mask. Because of the fact of people going to judge me based off of my skin color, how big my lips are, how big my nose is, how my hair is, the clothes that I wear, all of these particular things. And I got to be very conscious of these things and understanding how I move could, whether that I may not make it at home that evening. All of that stuff is stress. But then for me to show up as a therapist, I also had to keep that in mind whenever I'm dealing with someone that looks like me, when I'm dealing with somebody that's the younger me. So if they're dealing with these particular things, I have to meet them where they're at. I have to meet them personally as a person. So understanding that sometimes the textbooks doesn't teach you how to deal with different folks, right? Because not all the textbooks are written by the array of people that we may encounter. So for that, I had to step outside of myself and go to meet people where they are and learn about them. I challenge you all as social workers, get outside of your own bubble. That radical hope comes from being able to find ways to connect and relate to other folks that don't look like you, folks that don't share the same beliefs, folks that can teach you something. I go into each conversation, each session, anything that I'm doing, like, what am I going to learn from this particular individual? Because just because I have a license, just because I have this degree, just because I have any of those particular things doesn't make me better than anybody else. But then also with that is understanding that, when you are working, especially in this field and especially in the field of service, you also need to learn about you. That's what therapy did for me. That's where me doing my own shadow work, me being able to address my own challenges. First of all, me being honest with myself about who I am, but then who I want to be. A lot of times we get caught up in, 16, 17, 18-year-old Rashaan, he was smart. He was this top athlete. Coming from Berkeley T County, he should have been, if he didn't make it to the league or go run track in the Olympics, he should be a doctor because he's smart. A lot of times I try to live up to those particular things because people from my hood expected me to put the hood on my back and then also show up in so many different areas, not knowing the different pressures and all of those things that I had to deal with. So I had to take a seat back and sit back and understand, who are you? Every social worker, every student, every faculty, anybody that's watching this, I want you to really take a step back and understand, who are you? Outside of what your family thinks you should be, outside of what your friends think you should be, outside of all of these other societal pressures, who are you? Because once you start to understand who you are, those are the things that's going to allow you to understand how you serve other folks. When you're able to show up as your authentic self, you'll be amazed at what that attracts. But then also that's going to allow you to start to see the systematic stuff that's around you that's messed up. I come from a place, I always relate to where I come from because I come from a place where there are limited resources for everybody that's in the area, not just, people of color, but for everybody because we're in rural North Carolina. And I come from those places. So then you think about the equity that comes along with that or the lack thereof. How do you create those particular things? We have, there's an issue when it comes down to access to treatment. There's an issue to the lack of clinicians, whether that be social workers, whether that be psychotherapists, whether that be all of these, any psychiatrists, all of these. We're running low, especially during this pandemic, y'all. But you think about those people that don't have those certain resources or those certain privileges. Even myself as a male, I understand that I have certain privileges. And I have to step outside of myself and, have conversations with people that don't identify as male, or people that don't have these certain things. That how can I show up for them? How can I support them? These are the questions that you have to ask. In addition to y'all showing up as a social worker and wanting to serve people, don't forget to serve yourself. I get it. We want to, a lot of times we go into this type of profession because we want to help people. But then a lot of times you get burnt out very quickly because of the fact of in many situations, we are overworked and underpaid. So at what point do you take care of yourself too? Whether that's taking your vacation, whether that's understanding what your self-care routine needs to be so that you're able to continue to show up. Also understanding your own personal limits. All of these particular things play a role. Building your own community. That's one of the major ways when it comes down to it. I look at the radical hope as a sense of building community and understanding what my lane is. I can't do everything. I have to find people that's, especially you all as social workers, that are connecting dots, right? So where the food pantries are, people that can help with financial assistance, people can help with housing, people can help with those. Build your community so you can start directing people to those particular things. Even if you're in a clinical setting, still build your community, because you may be dealing with something that you may not be an expert on, or you may not even just have the capacity to deal with certain things, and that's okay. Build your community. All of these particular things can impact you when it comes down to how do you keep that hope. Because for me, as a therapist that's also living through this pandemic, just like you all are, we sometimes my clients show up and they be like, yo, what do I do here? And in the back of my head, I'm like, I ain't got nothing for you, because I'm trying to figure it out myself. But it's that ability to be authentic with them and understand, like, you can still show up. Sometimes that's what you need. Also, radical hope, and sometimes you need radical interventions to create change. As someone that has worked in the mental health field for over 15 years, I've seen how insurance companies may categorize certain therapeutic techniques, or how we are, you don't get paid for certain types of interventions that you employ. So for me, even right here in my office, I have a PlayStation in my office. I have a basketball hoop in my office. I have games, all of these particular things, but these are the things that I know will allow me to connect with my clientele and with my population. I have to adapt what I learned in school and be able to translate it to the individuals that I'm looking to serve, because I can't expect everybody to come in and just want to sit down on this particular couch right here and divulge everything to me. That goes back to me meeting people where they are. I'm one of those therapists that I go to people's houses. I take my clients to, the park, and I make them comfortable and allow them to be able to feel like they can open up to me about certain things. And if I don't know the answers, I'm like, yo, I don't know. But I will find out. That's what it means to be an advocate. That's what it means to be, an ally. That's what it actually means to be able to show up and support that person. And not just try to, push off what you think they should do, or so you got to meet them where they are. That's where that critical reflection comes in at. With that, I took that on my own model, just being on both sides of the couch and understanding that I have to treat people as people first. Learn who they are, even if we share the same skin tone, even if we share the same, even if you share the same household, everybody is not the same. Challenging myself to talk with people that are different than me, learning about things that are different than me. Even if I don't agree, I can still learn about it. I have a client now that's Muslim. I challenge myself to start reading the Quran. Not that they asked me to. It's just that I need to learn more about that particular culture to be able to serve them better. And being open to learning those things, whether I agree or not. Those small things go a very long way. Can you think about how it is when you meet someone and they take an interest into the things that you enjoy, whether they like them or not? Think about how that makes you feel as a person. But then think about how it makes you feel as far as wanting to open up more and share even more with them. That's how you learn about folks. That's how you learn how to support them. That's how you learn how to serve. Especially with so much other stuff that goes against, what we are trying to do as helpers and service people. These different barriers to so many different things. And then also there's the racial and social injustices that are going on for various populations. I can't show up for you if I don't know what you need. But then also I need to put myself in a position to understand and hear what you need before I even try to do so. Because sometimes our help is not actual help, because we're basing it off our own limited view and not from that view of that particular person or that particular group. We're dealing with a lot of, we're dealing with decades, generations of injustices here. And then we only have to take them small, piece by piece when it comes to really addressing these particular issues and these challenges. And then also, for you all that are social workers, I know y'all are burnt out. Yo, don't do what I was doing back. I mean, it's cool to have a drink or whatever, or do what you need to do to relax. But then also, like I said, make sure that you are indulging into your own self-care routines that are really actually self-care routines, and not just something that's going to mask the different issues and challenges that you have going on. I always recommend people, talk to a therapist, please. Get your house in order as well as you out here trying to help other folks. Understand that therapy looks different for everyone. It may not be sitting on the couch. It may be energy healing, such as Reiki, or it may be drum circles, or it may be someone's spirituality or their religion. All of these particular things, all of these things can work together. Your social workers, connect the dots. And actually, do that for yourself, do that for your families, do that for, watch that ripple effect. because that's what it happened for me. When I started taking care of myself, when I was journaling, when I started to learn about, who I am as a particular person, I started to learn my likes, my dislikes. I started to learn my triggers. I started to learn my protective factors. I was able to pick up on those things in other folks and then also help them do the same thing. Those were the things I didn't learn in a book. Those were the things I was able to combine with the knowledge from the book and then be able to serve other folks and add my own little flavor to it. I think that's the thing about it, because when you're able to add your own flavor to it, you can have fun with it. When you can have fun with it, you don't have to be as burnt out with it. Whether that's me hosting a coloring night or whether that's me, one of my clients be like, yo, let's go to the basketball court today instead of going into the office. All right, cool. Those are the things that will really allow you to challenge the status quo, but then be able to help so many other people. And with that being said, I understand that I wanted to invite, 3 students that are actually in school now for social work, and I know they possibly have some questions or anything that they wanted to add to the conversation, especially as a student, right? I've been someone that's been in this game for a good little minute, so I wanted to, y'all a new generation or a new breed of servers coming through. So I wanted to create this opportunity. For one, I want you all to introduce yourselves. And then we can go into the conversation as far as, what do y'all want to know as actual students? I guess we'll start with Janika.
It's Jenica.
Jenica, I'm sorry, Jenica.
It's okay. So yes, my name is Jenica Slavic, and I am at UW-Madison in the part-time master's program for social work. And I also am an ongoing social worker in Dane County in youth justice. So we're going around.
Yeah, going around. Yeah.
Making sure.
My name is Malia Lucas. I am getting my BSW in social work, so I'm still an undergrad. And I am doing an internship with Dane County Human Services and CPS and doing something called Family Group Conferencing.
Dope.
And my name is Rwenshaun Hall. I'm a second-year MSW student at the University of Wisconsin, graduating this May. And I do work with Black entrepreneurship in the state of Wisconsin for UW Extension.
Cool. I appreciate you, all 3 of you all joining. And I guess we wanted to open it up. What questions and stuff do you have? Don't feel shy or anything, and we can just chop it up.
I'd like to start with a question that I felt of interest. First, I'd like to say, man, I resonate with a lot of things you spoke about throughout that whole keynote. So I just wanted to say it's good to meet you, and I appreciate a lot of the things that you said. Given, my first question is, given the diagnosis you received, specifically, how did you not, allow that to determine and change your future to who you are now?
Whew. Oh man, that's a great question. I think one of the things is I went through a period of denial, right? So when the doctor gave me that diagnosis, I was like, whatever, can I go home? I'm not, whatever. But then also as I got, as I started to understand more about it and start doing my own research, I had to accept that it was a part of me. And understanding that particular label, I had to utilize that label to understand what things do I need to do to be able to make myself feel better. But then also with that is understanding this is something I'm gonna be dealing with for the rest of my life, but it's not my sole thing. I'm still so many different other aspects. This is just a small piece to who Rashaan is. And so as I did that and started to, get comfortable with those particular things, the sky was the limit. I had to accept who I was and who I continued to grow to be. But then also, I didn't even go front. Once I started to open up with some of my people, some of my close friends and stuff, and it was just like, Okay, all right, and what? Like when that type of acceptance, it helped out a lot, which I know a lot of people may not have, with trying to understand who you are as a person.
I'll go next. So like I was saying, I'm an ongoing social worker with Youth Justice. And so I have a lot of kids on my caseload that have identified mental health needs or diagnoses. And I struggle with trying to get them to accept the seriousness of having this condition, and how if you don't take proactive measures, it could have a negative consequence. You mentioned suicide, you mentioned a whole bunch of other stuff. I know a lot of kids that my department works with, they self-medicate, all this other stuff. But I struggle coming from somebody who's from the system, trying to get them to buy in that therapy doesn't have to just be, spilling the beans about some traumatic event, and that it doesn't have to be like an office setting, even though I think sometimes we're restricted with that because of our funding resources. But I don't know, do you have any suggestions or tips on how to, get that equilibrium with the kiddos today that might be system involved, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I would say, when it comes down to dealing with children, and especially trying to find ways to relate to them, and especially when you're dealing with a limited budget, also build your community resources, whether that be mentoring programs, whether that be people that are constantly in the neighborhood that are like big brothers to them or big sisters to them, that are leaders in the actual community, utilizing those particular things. Because you as a social worker, like, honestly, sometimes they're gonna look at you and be like, yo, I'm not listening to what you got to say anyway. so you got to relay your messages through other folks, and get those stakeholders to be able to be your liaison and being able to share those particular things. So I think about it as like, if you have your own kids do not listen to their parents. Period.
I know that's right.
So if I'm trying to deliver something to a kid, to my own son, and he's not listening to me, I go to his friend and be like, look, I need you to put this bug in his ear, or go to his favorite auntie or uncle, or these particular things. So you have to, we used to live by a thing, right? It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to take care of all of us, period. Whether it's a child or adult, because I know some adults that need to be taken care of too. But it takes a village. So we need to, lean in heavy on these particular resources that you have available to you. Even like some of the times, like you can do like computer games and all of these particular things, whether they have those particular resources and stuff, or like some of my kids, I play iPhone games with them, because they may not have certain things, but they got an iPhone, right? And so being able to do those particular things with them. Also translating that into, especially if they're smaller kids, helping them identify their emotions, to teach them about those particular emotions. So sometimes it's not even focused on a particular diagnosis. It's just focusing on the symptoms and being like, yo, I don't want you to feel bad. So what things make you feel good? And let's focus on those particular things, because the diagnosis itself is scary.
Yeah, it's very scary. And just a little follow-up on that is, so a kiddo may have a diagnosis that could be bipolar or whatever, it could be anxiety or depression or ADHD, but there's a huge pushback too, especially in the Black community, with medication. Mm-hmm. And so when providers are prescribing these meds for the kids on, just speaking for me, my I statement on my caseload, I'm like, hey, is little Johnny taking his medication? And they're like, I don't want to have him have that mess, that poison, da-da-da. And so there's a part of me that wants to honor that, right? Being mm-hmm. a Black woman, knowing that there's some sketchy history with our medical community and all that other stuff, but then also sometimes the meds work and can actually, do what they're supposed to do, which is that equilibrium that you were talking about. So right. I guess I just struggle because I want to be true to that, but also stress the fact that you're not doing okay right now. Like there's signs that you need help. And I want to relay that without trying to be a part of the system that's trying to over-medicate kids, and have a hidden agenda. So
over-medicate kids, misdiagnose kids, and all of that other stuff too. So like, even with that is understanding, like, so we have a plethora. So I'm also I do research on herbs and all of those particular things. So like also if there are some natural things that they can try, you know, and trying to understand that it's about, like I said, a lot of times when it comes down to dealing with those particular with popular anybody, period. Yo, what are you into? You know, and so even when it comes down to, oh, you don't want to take certain medication, what type of food are you eating? You know, is this kid eating a whole bunch of sugar and then crashing, and then that's you see these behaviors based off of that? You know, let's switch up a little bit. Let's drink more water. Let's eat some more vegetables. You know, and those particular things. So because all of this stuff plays hand in hand. Whereas, you know, it's still like we're not focusing on the medication, but you're still putting chemicals in your body when you're eating McDonald's and all of this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? So those are still other chemicals that we can start to reduce, and maybe that can help out in certain instances. So it's about being creative in those particular senses. Oh, let's eat more fruit. Instead of you eating candy, I'm gonna give you an orange. It's still sweet, but let's, you know, so those particular things and being able to switch some of that stuff up and then helping them track those particular moves.
That's so simple, but it's blowing my mind. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
I can jump in with a question. You shared a lot about your own personal struggles with mental health and stuff, and I appreciate you sharing that because it's a vulnerable thing to kind of unleash on 2,000 people watching. And you said something about, you know, being who you needed. And I really resonated with that. Like a lot of my family says that to me when I talk about, you know, what I want to do in the field. And I actually wrote about that in my essay to the School of Social Work. So I'm connecting with you there. But I was wondering how you manage like being who you needed with your clients, but also if you're feeling triggered by something that's coming up in the world or in those conversations with your clients, how do you find a balance there?
That's a great question. For me, it's about making sure I take care of myself, period. I still go to therapy. I still take my meds. I also still watch my diet. I still, you know, do these particular things. Every morning, I'm up at 4 o'clock. I'm going to the gym. I'm meditating. I'm doing, you know, I'm writing in my journal. I am making sure that I, you know, do whatever Reiki work and all of these, my energy work, all of these things are important to me because I got to make myself a priority. But then also I'm understanding that when I ain't got it, I feel like I don't have it. And you know, you got to. I'm an introvert. I'm an extroverted introvert. So I can be around people, but like being around people drains me. So I need that time alone, and I need that where I can just sit in the house and not do anything. And some people don't get that, but you have to make that priority for yourself and understand those things that pour back into you. So like, even when it comes down to certain things that if I'm triggered by something in a session with a client, you know, I'll make it through that particular session, but then also I need to write that down and understand I need to go work on that with my actual therapist, or, you know, understanding me meditating on that, saying, where do I feel this particular energy? Why am I triggered by this? What happened to me in my past that's, you know, making me feel some type of way? Because I don't want to transfer this particular energy to this client by them, you know, by triggering me, and then I'm not helping them. And then if it's something that I can't easily work out myself, I may have to refer that particular client out. So again, that comes down to understanding your own boundaries and understanding your own limitations. And it takes work. I mean, you go learn as you work in the field, and some stuff you ain't gonna know you gonna be triggered by it till you're triggered by it. But you also need to take note of it when you are triggered by it, so that you know you don't put yourself in that situation again, or you don't put yourself in a situation you may hurt yourself or hurt somebody else.
I hear you, you know, talking a little bit or a lot about, you know, the importance of self-care. And, you know, if you want to be present with your clients, you have to first be present with yourself. And, you know, I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, you know, throughout this program. And I'm also applying for the DSW program at UW-Madison. So just to continue further in the education in the field, for sure. But specifically talking with us, as Black men, I'm the only Black male in my program. And like, I guess my question is, I heard you talking earlier about, regarding your experiences with the Black male therapist that you received and that you talked to, and how important that was for you, the way he shook your hand, the way, y'all gave each other that head nod, of, I see you, and, just the communication in general, man. And how, I guess my question is, how important is it for people to show up in spaces authentically themselves, and like, what does that look like for you? And like, how has that been important, within your life and your own practice?
Yo, that's a great question. It's vital. From the aspect of being able to build that rapport, but then also it's also allows me to be confident in myself, because I am comfortable when I come into my office. I am comfortable when I show up to somebody. Like I don't wear a suit and tie to work. Like, that ain't me. Like I got some fly kicks on and some sweats and some joggers, and I'm chilling, you know what I'm saying? So like that's how I roll. But then also and I don't say this to be cocky or anything, but it gives you a different type of swagger when you're able to wear what you want to wear and be who you are. And then people can, gravitate towards that. They be like, yo, you who you are, so I'm gonna show up who I am. Some of my kids be like, yo, Mr. Sean, you got the Concords on. I'm like, yo, you ain't fly. So we start joining with each other back and forth. It'd be stuff like that like a lot that culturally goes a long way. But then also with that, like I said, the self-care that I mentioned for you all, it comes down to learning who you are. Like, authentically who you are. So that way you're able to show up in those particular moments. And that's going to allow them. I mean, I'm not just saying this for just, Black folks. So like, I even have, Caucasian people that come to me and be like, yo, like, I appreciate you for being who you are regardless. And I know you can help me. I had a client today and be like, yo, he was like, man, I can come in here and say this, that, and the third, and I ain't got to do a whole bunch of explanation because I know you get where I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. So like, those things can go a long way, but then also it cuts down on your treatment plans for these individuals, because you ain't got to go through all these different walls and stuff, right? Because people feel like, let's be real, we are not trustworthy people. When it comes down, like, we don't, give a lot to other folks, not to strangers, right? When we're going to seek help. And mental health is something that's fairly new to us. So we really ain't about to go share everything that's going on in our life and being completely open and honest. So you got to find ways to build that rapport. And when they feel comfortable with you, you'll be surprised at them opening up certain things. But then also, like you said, when it comes down to me showing up as I like sports. So if I'm going to play sports with a kid at the gym, he's talking to me and don't even realize he's divulging so much information. Because he's more so focusing on shooting the hoop than all the stuff that he's spilling out. Especially for males, because I can't tell a man to come in here and be like, look, oh, so tell me about your day. They could be looking at me, it was cool. I'm at a stalemate. So what do you do?
I have a question about imposter syndrome. So, I was looking you up and stuff, and I saw that you actually had a video, I think it was on YouTube maybe, with your therapist, where you were talking about imposter syndrome regarding your dissertation. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I actually had a side conversation with my supervisor about, I want to show that to the kiddos on my caseload, to what therapy can look like, where you can actually have a conversation, and you don't, like I referenced earlier, you don't have to talk about every traumatic thing that happened to you. But how, Dane County, I'm just going to put it out there, apologizing in advance, we're not really doing the best when it comes with our kids of color or just communities in general.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you have any advice that, I guess me again, that I could share with the youth on my caseload, especially Black men, or Black boys, because I feel like maybe with, societal norms right now and what we see on the news and social media, there's not a safe place for them to be themselves. I mean, I know I feel that at a certain extent, but I can't imagine, because when you were talking earlier about wearing, masks and stuff like that is a level of trauma and hypervigilance I can't fathom. So yeah, could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. One of the things when it comes down to the imposter syndrome during that session, so like that's my homie, and he's a therapist as well, based out of Cali. He's an imposter syndrome expert, so that's why we were talking about those things. And with that is, it's always a struggle to constantly run through your mind, what do I have to do in this particular setting? How do I need to say it? Or, what, make sure that I'm not intimidating anybody, or, all of those particular things. Like, that's a stress within itself. But then also when it comes down to dealing with kids, man, acknowledging that. So a lot of times we try to hide our kids from certain stuff, when instead of just being like, look, these are some of the stuff I'm going through, so I know you're going through it, right? But then also with our kids these days, they're dealing with some things that I wasn't privy to at certain ages. In elementary, middle school, and first part of the high school, I didn't have a cell phone. We didn't have social media at all. So you don't see people recording you and putting you on these different platforms, and then you got people from all over the world talking about you. So these particular things, even then when it comes down to certain identities and all, like when I was growing up, it was boy or girl. That's it. You have all of these different identities that you have now, and people can identify as, and then also, trying to navigate those spaces to figure out which identity do you adhere to, right? Or which identity are you? So like, they're living in a different world with us, but then also understanding that we have to acknowledge those particular things and create these spaces where we can talk about anything. And I want to address you as a person first. That's when I say we talk about radical hope and it's not that hard. I want to talk to you as a person. What things do you like? What things do you dislike? Let's start there and get to know them on a humanity level before anything else. And then that can go a very long way when it comes down to serving these actual communities.
Again, when you say it, it's like, well, duh, but actually putting it into practice, because I just feel like a lot of youth today, especially that are system involved, there's this armor, for like survival skills. And then just, I think like this fear of being weak, or I guess you can fill in the blank, whatever, describing word you want to use. I just want to move forward with that. But then also me as their social worker, as an older woman, right? Like, hey, kids, they're not buying into that, even though I try so hard. But yeah, I appreciate that, like meeting them where they are, acknowledging them. So
but then sometimes you can't. Okay, so that's one of the things we also have to realize as helpers, right? We have to get out of our own way and let our ego go and let somebody else do the work at times too. Because sometimes we want to help because we want to say we help, and that's okay. But you can also help by putting somebody else in a position to help instead of you actually doing the work too. Because you may not be the vessel that needs to be delivering that message to that particular person or that particular community.
Very true. Very true. And I know I'm not. And so that's why I'm like knocking on the door, help me. So yeah, I agree with you 100% on that.
Okay, I have a question, but it's going to take a little bit of a preface before I get to the actual bulk of it. So yesterday in my psychopathology class, we talked a bit about how this girl did not like the DSM-5 and like overdiagnosing and underdiagnosing and misdiagnosing and stuff, and how it can be really tricky. And, like Black boys are overdiagnosed with ADHD often because like the symptoms of trauma often present as symptoms of ADHD because, like inability to pay attention and sit still and whatnot. And how do you kind of deal with, I guess, balancing that? I know you said that you go into homes and do treatment sometimes, but how do you ensure that before you make a diagnosis that you are getting like the whole environmental picture and historical context and all of that before you kind of jump to certain conclusions? Like, do you have specific strategies for that?
That's a very good question, because a lot of times I've seen kids and stuff misdiagnosed. But then when I asked the clinician, how did you give this particular diagnosis? And they'll be like, oh, I talked to the teacher. That's it. Like, you ain't talk to nobody else. So like, one of my things is getting information from all supports, and being able to get a well-rounded view as far as what's going on with the actual client, getting their perception of it, but then also getting a perception from those who are always around them, and then collaborating on those particular aspects. So one of the things that I think falls to the wayside, especially in our profession, is continuum of care. Right. So that's being able to talk to all different entities that are playing a huge role into this one particular person's life. We work in silos when we're working with folks, when we need to be working together to get I need to know what's going on with this person physically. And then I can tell you what's going on with this person mentally. But then mom can tell you what she's seeing in the house. Little brother or older brother can probably tell you what he's seeing in the environment and outside of the home. And then you go into the school system and the teacher can tell you what's going on there. Like, it's a collaborative effort, but then also it's the therapist's job to be able to gather as much information from all parties involved. And I think that takes a little extra work. But it's the only way to really, give a more adequate diagnosis. But then also, so I personally don't like diagnosing individuals on the first meeting, just because, you ain't gonna get everything. But then insurance companies put you in a rabbit hole, like you can't bill them unless you got a certain diagnosis, right? So when it comes down to diagnosis, I start off broad, and then as you continue to learn the individual, maybe you make it a little bit more specific. But then also, like, as a clinician, you are able to make an addendum to their diagnosis. Like, if you see something that's changed, make an addendum and update that thing. Like, don't just sit there and let them ride with this certain diagnosis when you know that this does not adhere to what they're actually going through. So I think a lot of times, and that's another thing of us getting out of our own egos and us getting out of our own way and be like, yo, I made a mistake with this. Let me make an addendum to this. You know what I'm saying? And then being able to make those changes. And I think that's the way to do it. And that's not the perfect way, but that's how I approach it. I think we got a few more minutes. Y'all got anything else?
I do. So just one more question. So speaking, following up with what Malia was saying. So, what is your opinion on race-based trauma assessments? Do you think those are good tools or not? The reason why I'm bringing that up is because, in my county, in my role specifically, we have two kind of assessment tools. One is a YAZI, and the other one is a YJA, Youth Justice Assessment. And it's a report that we submit to the court, but it talks about, their school history, any mental health diagnoses, who's in the house, parents' legal history, all that type of stuff. And, there's a section in there that talks about traumatic events. But, I think when people see that part, it's, like a divorce or something like that, right? But as you spoke to earlier, and I think all of us on this meeting space can speak to, race-based trauma and microaggressions and racial abuse and discrimination. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Do you think that is an appropriate tool to utilize in, like, maybe your private practice or just in general? You know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely utilize like that. I use like the ACE, and those particular things when it comes down to those race-based things. But then we also got to understand the population that you're dealing with, and then also your the system that you're working within, right? So with that in mind, you're thinking about your system, and if they're not utilizing those particular assessments and those particular tools, that's when it comes down to you to advocate for that and being like, look, we need to add another layer to this particular thing, especially when we're working this particular community, because we're dealing with microaggression, not even just the microaggressions, but then let's talk about the secondary trauma that we're seeing, where people that look like us being shot and killed on TV, and the videos going viral and all of those particular, like, that's a whole nother thing that we have to deal with. And so with us as voices to be able to possibly impact certain policies and implement certain things, that's where we come in at, and you utilizing your voice and understanding that if this could help out the community, I need to speak up in certain instances, whether that be with my boss or whether that be with whoever the powers that be in those particular moments, and not being afraid to challenge those things, and then present a case as why we need it.
Yeah, I agree 300%. And I'm super blessed, and shout out to my supervisor, Bethany Matson. She's very tuned in and keyed in with this type of situation that our clients and our families face. And yeah, I think things should be possibly reworked and changed, because it does, like Malia, what you were saying earlier, it does impact how kids show up to school, how they interact in community. Over-diagnosing in with medication, or I read somewhere that young Black boys are schizophrenia, that they're the most diagnosed or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but something like that. That's alarming to hear, but it's because of PTSD and all these other terrible things that have happened with being just a Black person trying to survive every day.
And I challenge each of you that's on this with me. Think about the different things that you actually need. Y'all asking me questions, I'm gonna ask y'all. What's something that the younger you needed, and how are you planning on addressing that as a social worker?
I want to start because I love this question, and I talk to a lot of people about this specific question. I think that the biggest thing that the younger version of me needed, man, was a mentor. Was somebody who I can ask these questions to and have these conversations with, and that I know that they're being 100% authentic with me, and they understand my background. Again, I said we have a very similar background, and just how it sounds like we came up. I think the biggest difference is that I'm from a bigger city. I'm from the inner city of Chicago, so I think the biggest thing that I think I needed, and what I feel like I am trying to provide for the people that are in my sphere of influence, I guess I could say, is a mentor, and somebody who's going to keep it real, and somebody who's going to give you honest advice for your future self. Like, hey, I went through this similar thing. We have similar backgrounds. This is what I did. I know it doesn't fit for everybody, but these are the little steps that you can take to at least, know that you're moving in the correct, the right direction. And then I'm a big believer in, if I'm saying these things, instead of just saying it, I actually have to show you that I'm doing those as well, which I think is huge for the people that I take as mentees or see me as a mentor or whatnot. They see me, putting in the work, and, reaching my goals. If I say I'm about to do something, you're not just going to see me later on not reaching those goals. Even if I'm not completely there, you see that I'm working towards it. So the biggest thing for me was, I didn't have many mentors or people doing positive things at a young age. So it took a little bit longer for me to learn those things that I had to do. And that's just where I'm at now.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. I know we only got like a minute left, but I would love to hear the rest of y'all. What is something y'all need in the job field?
I'd say mine is similar, like just somebody that was representative of what you could be. Like in my family, there's a lot of kind of generational curses that are very cyclical, and things that I was kind of doomed to repeat that I didn't really want to, but I didn't have anybody to really say like, this is the path out of there. So I kind of sought it out in like books and TV shows or whatever. And I kind of had to teach myself all of these strategies. So it would have been nice to have someone kind of, you know, lead the path a little bit and show sort of a different side of what life could be. So here I am trying to do that for other people.
Not trying, you are doing, because you're in school and you're making it happen. You're doing. So we go work on that language. All right. You got something?
Of course I do. So I think, sorry for monopolizing it. I just have questions. But yeah, so I think for me would be like no preconceived notions, no judgment. I think that would have been helpful. So like come as I am, accept me for who I am. Some things are great, some things need a little work on. So I think that's important. I try to do that with my kiddos. Try to meet them where they're at, even if they're doing some questionable stuff.
I love it. I love it. And I guess for me, especially as I transition, you know, my thing was about being in mental health, you know, understanding mental health, that it's okay to be okay. But now as I transition even more and learn more about myself, it's about, you know, being authentic to yourself and having that space to be able to explore who you are. And so that's what I want you all to, that's my goals now, to be able to serve. And, but I know we were at time, and I know we're going to bring Khadijah back. I know Khadijah, please don't get on us for going over time, but we're sorry.
No, yeah, really appreciate the discussion. And so, yeah, with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us today, particularly to you, Rashaan, for being here. And then also, once again, to our 3 student speakers, Jenica Slavic, Malia Lucas, and Rajan Hall for this wonderful discussion. And just so a reminder to everyone that's participating and attending today to check the Eventbrite page for the upcoming 6 breakout sessions. There's a link there that you can click to join those sessions. And then finally, a quick reminder about the CEUs. So if you would like CEUs, in order to receive them, make sure you fill out the link that is in the description box to get that. And if you fill that out, we will make sure to follow up with you too, so you can get all those. But with that, we're going to take a quick break with breakout sessions beginning at 2 p.m. But once again, thank you so much for joining us today and for this wonderful, wonderful discussion.
Bye, y'all.